Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We are starting off with a poll about where you're at in your divorce journey. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. We are here with Molly McPherson, and I am with Divorce.com. I'm Nicole. I lead our marketing efforts. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Divorce.com, we are an all-inclusive platform that helps people get through their divorce process. We offer expert guidance, easy-to-use resources. We have mediators, so you can do mediation sessions with us. We also offer filing assistance. We generate paperwork. And basically, we are here for you throughout your entire divorce journey so that it's less costly, less conflictual, and ultimately gets you through this process, which is very stressful, in a way that's a little bit smoother and a little bit easier to get out on the other side. It's very important for us to share that because we know we're all here today to talk about how you can have a smoother start to your divorce. Like I said, we are joined by Molly McPherson. She's a renowned crisis communication strategist. So I will hand it off to you, Molly, to share a little bit more about your background and what we're planning to do today.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Nicole. I'm so happy to be here. Hello, everyone. Right off the bat, I'm going to tell you, even though we have titled this as a webinar, it is more of a discussion. So we certainly want you to interact and feel as if we're all in the room together, because the ultimate goal here is to find a solution for maybe some of the issues that you might be having out there, or you might just be, curious about going through divorce. First, just as a test, just to know, in our chat, many of you are probably familiar with using Zoom right now. We do have the poll question, but also, just let us know if there's any reason, that brought you here. Is there anything in particular that you wanted to know? We want to make sure that every single question is answered. In this discussion, it is going to be 30 minutes, and then we will stop, and there will be a recording that will be sent to you. But if there are lingering questions here, Nicole and I said that we would definitely, stay on for a couple minutes and answer them. But I'm happy that you're all here, joining me today. This is an important collaboration with me because, one, I believe so strongly in what Divorce.com does in terms of, just a mission. And it all comes down to helping people get through one of the most challenging conflicts in their life. Divorce.com, they want people to have this, easy, smooth divorce, but many people know that it is far from it. It is very, very difficult to have a smooth divorce. And so my goal always in communication is to remove conflict and to make, communication effective, on both sides, because there's so many emotions, at play. So the reason why you're here and why I collaborated with Divorce.com on this is so much of what I do in my work as a crisis communication strategist applies to human behavior and how people react. And because I'm in crisis strategy, so much of the emotional behavior that I see is around conflict or stress or fear. And I talk about it online very much in the realm of celebrity and breaking news and everything like that. But everyone knows in real life, everyone has conflict, and particularly around this issue. Now, the subtext of all my work, just to let you all know, is my drive is because I personally went through a divorce. So anyone who watches my content or follows along with me, that is the subtext of so much of what I do, because my divorce was a brutal, brutal process, and it was only 4 years ago, and it still lingers to this day. So it is always in the back of my mind, is how all of the virtues in communication and in life kind of get you through things. And it applies to divorce as well. And I'm talking about courage. I'm talking about transparency, talking about all the positive things, which really matches what the mission of Divorce.com is. So the connection that I've noticed is, whether it's in my work, whether it's like a boardroom or a client, whether it's a known client, an influencer, celebrity, or if it's a business or a brand, it all comes down to a problem based on human behavior, where there's one person who either has fear or greed or avarice. Like they want what they want. It's all self-interest. And that happens so often in divorce. So I want to share with you 3 of the strategies that I use all the time in my work that happens to appear in divorce as well. Now, do we have the results of the poll questions?
Good question.
Okay, so the question we had asked, where are you emotionally in this journey? Oh my gosh, so 14% of you are overwhelmed and stressed. I'm so sorry to hear that, but I'm also very happy that you're here because that's what we're talking about. Sadness and grief certainly is a huge element of it. And when people think about grief, so many times they think about death and dying, but really grief is loss. And that certainly is what a divorce is. Pending divorce is a loss of marriage, but also in many cases it's family. The feeling, I'm starting to feel a sense of acceptance. Okay, that's good to feel. That's good to hear. A mix of emotions and uncertainty, expected and hopeful and ready to move forward. I love that. Then you're ready for that next step in all of this. Okay, all right. So these are the 3 strategies that, I mean, honestly, if I have to be honest here, that I used myself, or I wish I would have used going through it. Now, the goal of divorce.com, like working with all of their customers, is to have a smooth divorce. But I'm sharing this with you in the hopes that you do have a smooth divorce. So these will apply if you're having a very difficult one, but also if you have acrimony or if the 2 of you are working together in an agreement. Okay, these are the same things that will apply. Nicole, I just want to double check because I'm not seeing anything. Is the chat open to everyone?
It should be, yeah.
Okay, just if someone could, and I know like maybe for privacy, but people maybe don't want to say anything. But if there's anything they want to ask or if you want to say, definitely go in there if you have any questions, and then we'll put and the Q&A. Is that open as well, Nicole? So we have the Q&A as well if you
Yeah.
want to add that. Okay, so now the number 1 strategy is to remember it's business and not personal. And this is something that I've applied. Thanks, Janice. Gail, absolutely awesome. Thanks,
Hey.
you guys. So feel free to jump in at any time. I love to go to the chat, and I love if you have any questions or comments through it, that makes it even better. Okay, so Ricky will definitely. So if you see questions in there, Nicole is going to moderate it as well, and she'll answer questions, and then I'll look at them, and we'll make sure every question is answered by the end of this. Now, this is inspired from one of my favorite movies, which is The Godfather. Okay, and if anyone's ever seen that movie before, it's when the Robert Duvall character, who was playing the conciliere, said to Sonny, who was the one son, James Caan, who was like a hothead, and then Michael, who was really, really calm, and he ended up being the Godfather. That applies in fiction, in movies, in fiction, but it also applies in life, whether it's divorce or anything else or in a crisis. You want to remove or divorce yourself from emotion. If you have a complicated divorce, and if you're going through conflict, so often there are people out there when they want to manipulate a situation, they try to bait you. And baiting is baiting emotion, because when people get emotional, then they can't think clearly. Okay. And then sometimes it leaves them open for gaslighting. And that's when people use your emotion and weaponize it against you. So whether it's a spouse, whether it's a boss, or sometimes even if it's a lawyer, I had an incident with my lawyer where she did not understand complicated manipulative behavior, didn't understand narcissistic tendencies, which shocks me that a lot of lawyers don't understand that. It's important to have a lawyer who gets that. And if you understand it as well. So if you remove the emotion, it brings clarity, but it also lets the other person know this is business. And then eventually you can get to the place where you're both on the same page. And that's where you can mutually work together and, in your divorce. So always remember that phrase, you want to divorce emotion, because it also allows you to keep objectivity through all of it. When things become too subjective, when it's emotional or opinion or what you think or what you want, things get complicated, things get messy. And the problem with whether it's a crisis in business or a brand or a celebrity or going through a divorce, when things become messy, they become expensive, they become costly. They can become costly to your life, to your family unit, to your kids, or actually with a lawyer as well. Abby's asking, one doesn't really know until they have truly experienced a narcissist. That's true. Now, the fact of the matter is, most people, like, narcissism only affects like less than 5% of the people. However, there are a lot of people who have the tendencies of narcissism. It may not be fully like that, but different tendencies. So when it comes to that type of behavior, that's when, more than anything, you don't want to take the bait and you want to divorce yourself from that emotion, because anyone who's a narcissist or like it, they feed on emotion. So keeping it like a business is the most important thing that you can do throughout it. Now, Kathleen's asking about mediation. In this strategy, that's a good point to introduce the mediation aspect of it, because once you're in mediation, it means you are approaching it in a more objective way. Okay, you're sitting down and you're both working with a mediator. But the other piece about a mediator, you can only use mediation if you both are 100% in agreement and you mutually have decided that you both want the goal of moving forward together on a divorce. And if that's the case and you're both on the same page, then you may not have to hire all these external people out there. You can do it more on your own and do it together, using guidance with that you'll find here with divorce.com. But mediation can also be like the playhouse of someone who complicates it, because they're just going to use that time to pretend that they're going along until the very end, they rip out the carpet, and then you're right back at the beginning. Okay, now the second strategy is this honest self-assessment. Now, honestly, when people go through conflict, the default mechanism is that they always assume that the other person is wrong. It is their problem and their problem alone, because you are following the rules, or you are following the typical guidelines. You might be the parent who has more attachment to the children and to the kids. You might be the house manager. You might be the person who typically runs things. So you have these expectations that the divorce will run the same way. I find that this is one of these really, really crafty types of strategies to have in any type of conflict. And that is doing the mirror test and really holding the mirror up to yourself and say, what is your role in all of this? Now, it's not to look for your fault. Okay, it's not. But typically in a divorce, all you see is the other person's fault and how you've been wronged. And in many cases, there is in some divorces where it is that bad, where there is abuse and where people are taken advantage of, certainly. But in some cases, a spouse might do something that causes you to do something else. So you still think it's 100% their fault, but maybe how you're reacting to it could be different. And I think if you really hold the mirror up to yourself and see where your weaknesses lie, if you fix that or change that, that is going to help you with this divorce process. Now, if you're dealing with someone, again, we always default back to like the difficult people, the difficult spouse, the ones who are the narcissists, so on and so forth. It also serves as it's a way to serve as your own weapon, because they're expecting you to act a certain way. They're expecting you to have this weakness. But if you know that you're not that way, but they think you're that way, it can be another effective tool. So let's say you have a hot temper. Let's say that you interrupt people. Let's say you're so emotional and you burst. Like, actually take a pause and say, okay, what can I do to change that? How can I stop and listen? Another effective tool, and this is where I think it will help you when you mutually work together in a divorce. And I say this in a crisis all the time with my clients, all the time. Whatever you see this other person doing, show empathy. And what empathy is, it's not necessarily sympathy, it's empathy. And that is placing yourself in the other person's shoes. That is stopping your thoughts and putting yourself in their shoes and trying to think now, what are they thinking? Now, even if you're dealing with someone who's difficult, they've cut off the money. They're weaponizing something against you. They're making it so difficult for you to get a divorce. Step in their shoes just to find out, where is this coming from? You'll typically find that it comes from a place of weakness and insecurity. Anyone who wants to file divorce against someone, it makes them feel insecure. And insecure can make people do bad things. And sometimes it's because they really aren't good people, but many, many times it's because they're hurt or they're scared. And so their defense mechanisms are up, and then that's why they're making it difficult. So if you can start to speak in that language and say, I get the feeling that you feel worried about this or scared about this. Let me tell you what I have here. Your goal is security. You want the other person to feel secure, that they're not going to be hurt, or they're not going to be abandoned, or the kids are going to be turned against them, or they're going to take all their money. It's about building up trust and security. Now, at this point, let's throw in this other poll that we have. And if you could ask this question, we want to do this in real time. How often do you reflect on your role and actions during your divorce process? So much of divorce is about thinking about what that other person is doing and what that other person is doing to you. And in many cases, if you're like a primary caregiver to kids, you're wearing your kids' emotions. Oh, it says hosts and panels. Oh, gotcha. You're wearing your kids' emotions as well. So it's more difficult. But how often do you really think about your role in it? So, okay. Oh my goodness. I can feel this with you. You think about it every single day. And I bet if we had this in the poll, you probably think about it multiple times a day, every single day, weekly and occasionally. So the fact that rarely and never, no one has answered either one of those, I think that's a really good sign that you're all here for good reasons. You know, you want to find ways that you can make this divorce work. Now, ultimately, the goal is that we want you to mutually come to a place where you both have mutual comfort, security, and an understanding about what the divorce process is and how you're going to get through it. That's the goal. That's divorce.com's goal. That's my goal when I work with clients. I want everyone to have mutual understanding. But I also know in my work and in my life and experience, it's so difficult to do because there are some people who are never, ever going to change. They are going to make it difficult the entire way. So you have to think and reflect to yourself, what can I do to change that? Okay. And now the next piece of it is also, the communication part about it. And that's this is like the secret weapon. So when it comes to divorce, in many cases where it's very challenging and very, very difficult, sometimes the divorce comes with a lot of shame. Well, many times it comes with shame. Both people on both sides just feel shame for not being able to stick it out in a marriage. There's shame that they weren't the spouse that they needed to be. There's even a shame that maybe it's just failure. Like, I just failed at something else. And shame does something to people. It actually just muddles and muddies the water, and it just complicates things. So when you are mutually in agreement on certain things, it adds this calm, but it also adds clarity. And where I get clarity in my role as a crisis communication strategist is when we start planning what the response is going to be. So I get hired usually when everything's blown up, everything is chaotic, and someone has hired me because someone has done something wrong, and they want me to go after them and get them because they're starting to damage them. And I would say the majority of the time, definitely the majority of the time, when I come in, I think that person who's on the attack, like, I talk about cancel culture a lot, and when people kind of rise up with people on social media and they decide they're going to attack, a brand or celebrity or whatever it is. What I often find is whatever the attack is about, there's usually a reason behind it, and that reason's justified. That there's a reason why people are coming after you. And it's my job now to explain to the client, this is the reason why we're here. Now, I have to do it in a very gentle way, a very calm way, but in a way to let them know if you acknowledge what some of the problems are and you communicate that in particular with the other person, it's going to clear up a lot of the conflict because the number one reason why conflict goes unresolved is because both parties or one party refuses to acknowledge their role in the conflict. They want to point all the fingers at the other person. So, if with open communication, and so in my professional world, that means let's write a response. Let's make an Instagram response. Let's do a video. Even though everyone associates me with apology videos, I don't love apology videos because it implies that people are 100% wrong. And in so many cases, no one's ever 100% wrong. It could be 80-20, 90-10, but it could also be 60-40. And so when you have that acknowledgement of just challenges on both sides, it helps you come to that mutual agreement. So this is where effective communication comes in. So let's say you're having trouble, and let's say you're trying to get your spouse on the same page with you. One of the best places you could start is, how are we going to communicate this divorce? Where are we going to say it publicly? Maybe it just starts with the kids. How do we talk with the kids? If you have mutual agreement on that, you can start building, use that as a foundation. How do we tell our parents? How do we tell our friends? How do we just tell people online? The big question about Facebook, when do we post it on Facebook? There's no hard, fast rule to that. You don't have to post it on Facebook. You don't have to make it public if you don't want to. Me, I'm very close to the vest on it. You'll know if you know me publicly. I rarely talk about it. Rarely, rarely, rarely. And the biggest reason why is because I don't want to make that a part of my brand, one. But two, I have kids. I have 4 kids. I don't want to be online to saying negative things about their family. But all the work that I do, the subtext is, how do we bust through conflict? All right. So at this point, so we still have like 8 minutes here. So if anyone has any questions that they want to ask, I'm going to get to Ricky's questions right now. I can answer them. And then certainly Nicole can answer them as well with divorce.com. Now, Ricky had asked, what happens when you can't find a lawyer? If you want to follow up with that question, you can. But my first question is, why can't you find a lawyer? Is it because of the expense? Is it because they're not taking any new clients? Is it because your spouse has called all the lawyers and now because of a conflict of interest, you don't have a lawyer? So that can be a very difficult thing to manage. What I would do is, instead of just looking for any type of lawyer, which I have to be honest, that's what I did. That was a massive mistake on my part, is I just chose a lawyer who I thought I could work with. And I thought, oh, females understand female problems. And that was a huge regret of mine. Like for me, I wish I hired a bulldog, a male bulldog, because I had to go up against a male bulldog who tried every horrible trick in the book, and it just made everything so complicated. What I would do if I were you is find the lawyer that you need for your divorce. Find that lawyer. If you think it's going to be complicated, then then certainly you have to find the right one. But if there's some mutual agreement there, then you can find a divorce and resources. And Nicole will tell you about this as well. There's a lot of resources out there where you can do a lot of things on your own. Julian's talking about, the 401k talk and how negotiable it is. I can tell you from firsthand experience, I've been divorced 3 years. I'm still dealing with 401k talk. Okay. And that's again, is when you have to deal with conflict. 401k talk, in terms of how to effectively communicate around that, is you want to communicate around the rules, because 401ks have rules typically. And in divorce, or depending on how you get it, spouses are supposed to get X amount, through a state. States have guidelines, every state is different, but they will tell you what the rules are. And they're actually, you can't move around if you're dealing with a government employee or a state employee, and a lot of private 401ks as well. So my answer there is, again, is to follow whatever the rules are and be in agreement. Now, if the 401k though, if you find that it's unfair, or you think parts of it are hidden or that it's wrong, you want to make sure that you understand exactly what is going on and how you are dealing with it. Working together mutually is always going to be the goal, but it doesn't necessarily always happen that way. But that's the goal that we want. Now, I will add one more bit here. If anyone has any questions, at this point, definitely answer them. But the best advice that I got in a divorce was way at the end of mine. And I just wanted my divorce to be over with. Like it was so painful. And it was with someone who just did not want to. Can we agree to, okay. Okay. I'm going to tie my final thing into this open Q&A. And I'm glad that you put an anonymous question there. That's great. Um, uh, is this, is I had to deal with, there were unpaid bills that my spouse was due and they were on my credit, or I was being stuck with bills I wasn't supposed to pay. And it was infuriating to me. And even not following the divorce. I mean, it stipulated in a divorce settlement, still not being divided in the money. And a friend of me also, a friend of mine said, who was also divorced, he said, it's only money. It's only money. So many times people will spend so much time and energy just on the money because one side knows the money is the power. And when money is power, how you can get around it, and is what I had to do, is I let it go, which absolutely threw him in a spiral. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. You're letting go of all this money. And it's because I just found a way, because my goal was to get through the divorce. So have that goal and go through it. Now, couldn't you agree to not divide your 401k? We don't want any of the spouses' 401k. Absolutely. You can do whatever you want. Most people just always assume that in divorce, everything is 50-50, or we have to cut it this way. Yes, there are state guidelines and everything, every state out there that you have to follow, but there is a lot of room for negotiation, because many, many times, and this is where divorce really does get complicated, and it doesn't have to be, is lawyers that you work with, especially if it's contentious, they don't want to agree to anything because they'll say to you, the judge won't agree with this. If you go to court, the judge won't agree. And more cases than not, divorce doesn't even go to court. It's all about the negotiation and what's happening between the two of you. So that is the key, is to make sure that effective communication is there and you both try and work towards something mutual. And that leads me right back to you, Nicole, if you have anything to say about how you come in.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
we have
did
one more
want to
question. Yeah.
readdress one more question about the lawyer. I don't know if
Mhm.
everyone understands this, but you actually don't need to get a divorce using a lawyer for everything you do. Sometimes people will consult with a lawyer to understand different legal aspects of their divorce. They'll consult with a financial advisor to understand how to break down a 401k or figure out what to do with their house. And they use services like ours to make sure that they're doing everything step by step, process by process. So it is important just for you all to understand it's not necessarily that you have to have a lawyer to do everything. And sometimes a lawyer isn't the best suited to figure out financial division or to rely on them for therapy, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's something I really want to make sure that people understand. And then as far as divorce.com, we're obviously here to help. And we have a group of attorneys that we work with to do that consultation. We also have mediators. So if you are able to, at least with your partner, agree that you don't want it to get contentious and you want to avoid going to court and have that judge make that decision for you. Not everyone is in that boat, but for many of you, if you are able to kind of use the tools and tricks that Molly has mentioned and you kind of ease emotions, it is possible to use mediation to get that common ground and ultimately figure out what's fair to both of you, document it, and then move through your divorce as smoothly as you can.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I wish, if I could go back in time, I wish that I hired ad hoc people, but that I was doing a lot of it on my own. Because as Angie points out here, in Canada, they have no fault divorce. And a friend of hers gave her this advice: don't waste billing hours telling the lawyer the why. Just get to the point. And if you have that mindset, you can do a lot of it on your own. So I highly recommend before you start calling lawyers, or before you start going forward, or even telling your spouse, particularly if it's a difficult divorce, do the research first. The more research you do, the more resources you look at, it's also going to help you to remain more objective and remove that emotional piece of it early. Because so many of you really do have it in you to do it on your own.
Yeah, and speaking of resources, I want to make sure everyone is aware that we'll be sending out the full recording of this training session so that you all can rewatch if you want to, and we'll be putting links in for any of the resources that we mentioned so that you can follow up and get that extra information and education around how this process works so that you're going into your process with a level head and ultimately trying to get out on the other end with as little conflict as you possibly can. So we appreciate all of you and be on the lookout for that follow-up communication sometime later this week.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today, and I wish you all the best of luck.